Hello and welcome to Like Maria. Today we are talking about GCSE English Language, and this is a video specifically for parents who are wondering how they can help their young people prepare and study and do the best they can in the upcoming exam. I'm Caroline and this is Maria, and we've both got more than 20 years experience in the classroom. We've also had our own children go through the GCSE system quite recently, so we've got plenty of insights that we can share with you. So Maria, can we start off just by asking you a couple of quick questions? Students will be studying GCSE English Language as well as GCSE English Literature. What are the differences between those two subjects?
Okay, well, let's deal with the literature to get it out of the way just to begin with. So, literature is texts that have been written and made up for entertainment. So, you might be looking at Shakespeare, you might look at some modern poetry, some novels, and things like that. And that's the exam where students need to learn loads of quotes and they go into the exam having read lots of texts and they write about them. So, that is English literature. And most people in the country study that, but it's kind of not so essential. English language is the kind of bones of reading and writing. And there are some literature texts involved in it and some non-fiction texts as well. But you don't need to learn quotes because you won't have read texts in order to write about them in the exam. So when you go into the exam, you'll be presented with texts, but they will be ones that you have not seen before. And you will have to read them and analyse them. And then you will have to do your own writing about them. So you will have to answer questions on them. And then you will do a piece of creative writing that is kind of loosely based on what you've read. So very much English language is testing the core skills of reading, analysing, understanding how writers work and the effects they try to produce, and then creating your own writing yourself. So that's the key difference.
Okay, so just to get this clear, if my student is coming home and they're saying that they're doing Jekyll and Hyde and Romeo and Juliet, that's literature. But it sounds like they won't have a set text of any kind for English language. It'll just be a
Absolutely.
range of different things.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, can you tell us a little bit about what the format of the exam or exams will be?
Okay, so obviously it depends a little bit depending on what exam board your school has signed up with. But loosely speaking, they're pretty much the same. There will be two exams, a paper one and a paper two. And one of these exams will be more creative and creative writing, and it'll be based on a literary text, something very descriptive. The other one will be more non-fiction writing, so a newspaper, a diary, a report, something like that, and will usually include a 19th century text, so an older text with more complex sentences and vocabulary. So you will be facing two papers. Now, each paper, and this is where it's good because it keeps things simple, each paper is divided into part A and part B. And for each paper, it's kind of the same. Part A, read the texts or text and answer 4 questions based on those texts. In part B, write something. So for paper 1, it will be write a short story, write the opening of a story, something like that, or write a description. And that's where you have to be really creative and use all your different imagery, and you put your plot and your characters and everything into that. In paper 2, the creative bit, the part B, will be write a speech, an article, or a letter. So it will be a factual piece of writing. But the formats for both papers are pretty much the same.
Okay, I mean, that sounds pretty tough, actually. It sounds like there's a lot of different bits to it, but equally quite creative. So some fun bits in the exam, at least.
A lot of students do enjoy the story writing, but they must bear in mind that there is also technique involved to that. You just can't run away with your ideas. You need to follow what your teacher has said about putting in certain techniques. I think it's a tough exam, I have to say. And one of the problems is the amount of reading that you are expected to do in a very short period of time. And this is particularly true of paper two, where you often have two texts, and one of them is quite complex. And so you really need to focus on reading efficiently and effectively.
So that brings me to my next question quite nicely, because one might argue that you can't really do anything to prepare for the exam, if everything is unseen when you get in there. So is there anything that parents can do to help or that young people can do to help themselves?
So that's a really good question. And often students do say, well, you can't really revise for English language. And that's absolutely not the case. You can't revise in terms of learning facts and figures and like you can for other exams, but you can practice skills as part of your revision. The biggest skill you can practice and actually must practice is reading. Now, whether that is reading blogs, reading the match report from the game on Sunday, reading even just turning on the subtitles on the YouTube channels that you watch, exposure to text is really important. Now, people, I'm sure, have heard this before. English teachers say, oh, you must read. Yeah, and we always do. But we're not expecting 16-year-olds to start reading Dickens and Jane Austen and very complex novels, particularly if they're not readers and it doesn't interest them. And particularly today when everything's on screen and very, very quick and very fast. But you can introduce your student to small chunks of reading, like I said, with the YouTube subtitles, or just picking a paragraph out of something that you're reading, maybe in the newspaper or in a news article, and just discussing it with them and saying, oh, have you seen this? Let's read this together. Or if you're reading a novel or see a particular interesting description, you could maybe pull out some of the vocabulary and just top up their vocabulary.
Yeah, it is important that young people see their parents reading, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's no good saying, well, we've got to read and it's really important. And then they don't see you doing that because you don't really like reading at all. Like I say, even if it's on your phone, reading a news app, a news outlet or whatever it is, to see that. And also, it's important that they see you writing. Because let's face it, when did we last write? I mean, we as teachers we use a pen to mark quite often still, but many people in the modern society, I'm not sure when they last picked up a pen, maybe to make a shopping list, but even I do that on Alexa now. So actually sitting down and writing with them, or maybe writing letters back and forth to each other, or getting a family member or a friend to write to the student and write. They can write back, just because actually, if you're sitting in these exams, some of them are 2 hours 15 long. If you're not used to writing, you're going to get cramp in your hand. So there's the physical aspect of just sitting and writing as well.
Yeah, really good tips. Thank you, Maria. So that sort of brings me to my last point then is there anything else, any other tips or bits of guidance that you can give us that will lead to success in this exam?
Well, as well as looking back over your schoolwork and as a parent being engaged in the students' work and looking at some of their stories, for example, and discussing them, talking about films and things for story prompts would be a really good thing. And of course, watching the films. But one of the things I always say, and this is perhaps to do just like in the month before the exam, is to sit down and go through timings with the student. So sit down with a past paper and just make sure that they know how many minutes to spend on each question, how many minutes to spend reading and planning, and practice these timings. So very often exams start at 9:25 in the morning or something like that. The teacher in the exam hall will write up on the board 9:25 and the student kind of panics because then they need to add the 15 minutes planning to that and when would the planning be and things like that. So make sure that they're able to do that and they're able to kind of calm themselves before the exam, but they're very certain of their timetable in the exam and the order in which they will do things. Some students might prefer to do question 5 first, the creative piece. Now, that's absolutely fine, but they should read the text first because very often the text has some help for them and some ideas for them with the creative piece. So they're free to make that choice, but they need to be savvy about it. And they don't want to be making these decisions in the exam. They want to have practice their timetabling and the order of the questions and the methods they're going to use. So it's very important. Even have a go at the paper with them.
That sounds great, Maria. Thank you. And you mentioned past papers there. Is it easy to get hold of past papers?
Yes, absolutely. So all the exam boards have past papers on their website. The website can be a bit clunky if you're not used to it, but a really good website is Revision World, where you can just click. If you Google past papers for the board, Revision World will come up and you can click on it, and they're all widely available there, along with the mark scheme.
Excellent, thank you. And any final thoughts for us?
So, final thoughts would be to use YouTube as well. There are some really good resources out there from YouTube, not least our channel Like Maria, but others as well, where you can hop onto and just get some ideas about analytical writing and paragraphs specifically for your exam board. And also, they'll give you kind of practice little paragraphs, exemplar paragraphs that you can read and look at.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much, Maria. And thank you to everyone for watching. We hope you found that content useful. Do like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.